Hi everyone, this is John. Welcome to the latest episode of the Subcontinent. We are here to bring light to some of the most important issues affecting the region. Our in-depth analysis of the topics will provide fresh perspectives from regional and international experts, and we will examine what key players think and what the common people have to say.
In this edition of the Subcontinent, we will be reviewing India's attitude to America's peace deal with the Afghan Taliban and see specifically to what extent New Delhi perceives the deal as contrary to its core interests in Afghanistan. And we will take a forensic look at Sri Lanka's clamping down on civil liberties in the name of security. What implications does this have for Sri Lanka's future politics?
India tried to have a grip on Afghan politics since before the Russo-Afghan War of 1979. But Pakistan completely changed the game by pushing the Afghan Jihad movement against the USSR for the United States, which weakened India's influence in Afghanistan. Pakistan holds influence over a very key player in the region, the Afghan Taliban. So why does this concern India? Well, Afghanistan is at a geostrategic location for India because the graveyard of empires has a long porous border with India's arch-rival Pakistan.
Needless to say, India is deeply interested in Afghan affairs. New Delhi may not have a strong physical presence in Afghanistan as other powers do, but nevertheless geography, and more specifically geopolitics, necessitate that India stays fully engaged with events in Afghanistan. As some of our old viewers may remember, India had strong ties to Afghanistan before the Soviet invasion of 1979. The ruling Afghan monarchy was viewed as a benign power by New Delhi and at any rate one that would never countenance hurting India's interests. The situation changed dramatically with the Soviet invasion and the Afghan Jihad, which rose to resist the invasion. The challenge to New Delhi was twofold. First, the Soviet invasion invited extensive foreign interference in Afghan affairs, notably from the United States, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, which strove to subvert Soviet power in Afghanistan. Second, the rise of the Mujahideen phenomenon went hand in hand with what New Delhi regarded as pro-Pakistan extremism. By the late 1980s, New Delhi's worst fears were beginning to be realized as Islamabad emerged as an influential force on the Afghan scene. These fears intensified still when the former pro-Soviet Afghan regime led by Muhammad Najibullah finally fell in May 1992.
Things were getting better for India when the US influence was present in Afghanistan, and the fight against Taliban was of mutual interest. Pakistan was also sharing a complicated relationship with the United States because the nuclear-armed arch-rival neighbor of India was accused of playing a double game by the United States, providing logistical support to the US against the Taliban and simultaneously helping the Taliban against the US. But now, with the Taliban-US peace deal accomplished through Pakistan's mediation, some say that India's decades of hard work has crumbled, and tables have now turned.
By the time the Taliban took over Kabul in September 1996, a full-scale nightmare was underway as far as India was concerned. The Taliban's ascendancy equated to Islamabad's ascendancy, which was in short the stuff of nightmares in New Delhi. The overthrow of the Taliban in late 2001 and the presence of US-led forces in the country since then has provided some respite, allowing New Delhi to re-establish some form of political and economic presence on the ground. But even then, this presence has been precarious and fraught with danger, as demonstrated by the bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul in July 2008, which killed scores of people. Now that the US has ostensibly made peace with the Taliban, New Delhi is fearful that the tentative gains of the past 18 years may be lost. So the question is, what is New Delhi going to do about all this? India can't scupper the deal, but it can mitigate the risks, for example by strengthening ties with staunchly anti-Taliban political forces in Kabul. This may even force New Delhi to get directly involved in Afghan affairs for the first time, something it has been loathing to do so far.
For more analysis, we are now joined by a former senior diplomat from India, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to the program. My first question is, who is principally in charge of India's policy in Afghanistan? Is it the Ministry of External Affairs or the intelligence services?
Well, I think that this question I find a little bit odd in one sense, that if you come to think of it, the relationship between the two countries is historic, civilizational, and people to people. And as in globally, similarly between India and Afghanistan, the relationship is driven and executed under the highest orders from the government of India and executed by the Ministry of External Affairs. And why I'm saying so is because we have created a strategic partnership council pursuant to the strategic partnership agreement between the two countries. And this body is headed by the foreign ministers of the two countries. It has already met twice. It takes care of all the essential and most significant aspects of the relationship in every which way possible. In addition, there are very many joint working groups at different levels which work there. Likewise, in the area of security, we do have the meetings between the national security advisors of the two countries, which is a normal thing. As far as intelligence is concerned, like everywhere else, they have a role to play, but they are not the decisive factor in this particular domain. And it is very true or very clearly visible because, as you know, we have the highest level discussions between Prime Minister and the President and other leaders of Afghanistan from time to time. And it has been rather much more frequent. And this is the only relationship where there is a lot of emotion and sentiment is invested at the people-to-people level for centuries. It's not from today. And therefore, I would like to reiterate that in terms of regular exchanges, in terms of day-to-day follow-up, in terms of the policy aspects, it is the Ministry of External Affairs under the directions of the Prime Minister that it works.
Let's look at the global media and their coverage of the 2001 intervention of the United States, and then we can come back to the question-answer session.
Instead of criticizing US-Taliban deal, India should think of ways of working around it. India's link to Iran's Chabahar port is routed through Afghanistan. After US withdrawal from Afghanistan, India's options are limited. India-Afghan trade to reach $2 billion by 2020. The terrorist group Daesh is focusing more and more on India. India welcomes Afghan government's decision to talk to the Taliban.
Thank you for staying with us, Mr. Trigunayat. Another question that I have for you is, now it's a sensitive one, bear with me please. We now have the Afghan deal in place without any consideration taken from India on how to implement it. How is that perceived in New Delhi? Can we say that India has lost or is losing the zero-sum game of power in Afghanistan?
Well, in the first place, we do not look at the developments in Afghanistan as a zero-sum game. It is a very simple, India's position has been straightforward. We welcome the peace process in Afghanistan, but we also always have said that this peace process should be Afghan-led, Afghan-driven, and Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled. And therefore, it is extremely important that this is being done. Now that the peace process, that is the agreement that you are referring to, that has been signed between the US and the Taliban, that is because Taliban is also a part of the Afghan nation. And therefore, whatever is happening there, and now they are working as per the deal between the US and with the Afghan government. And as you know, Indian government has very much welcomed this development, and it has also welcomed the recent formation of the intra-Afghan dialogue process and the negotiations that the teams have been from all sides have been worked out and detailed. So therefore, our basic essential work is to see that this progress in achieving the peace in Afghanistan, which has had a very big problem and this destabilization for a very long time, should go off. As far as India is concerned, it has always stood by the Afghan people in their reconstruction and their development. We have a new development partnership that has come about. India has committed large number of funds, a huge amount of funds, like $1 billion for this new development partnership. There is a new plan for education, capacity building, infrastructure from 2017 to 2022. So we continue to develop. In fact, as much as the Afghan people have needed, in fact, now we also have gone into trilateral cooperation with China, India and China and Afghanistan, where we are training the diplomats in both the countries, where we have also trained the police officers recently from Afghanistan. So the relationship is diversified, multifarious in different areas, and it is very deep and very strong, and therefore the relationship has a tremendous potential. We do not consider losing a battle in this case because, as you know, in accordance with several surveys, Indians and India is still liked the most by the Afghan people. And I find that this relationship is also driven from heart to heart. Lastly, you must have recently seen when Prime Minister Modi took the initiative to invite all the leaders of the SAARC countries, then the President of Afghanistan was part of that. And India has extended a special dispensation and assistance in the fight against COVID-19. So I believe that in every possible way that India can help, India is helping in Afghan people achieving their own independence, their own peace, their own prosperity. And India is a partner in that quest for development of Afghan people.
Thank you for your views, Mr. Anil Trigunayat, and thanks for coming back on our show. It was nice to have you. People have expressed their own opinions regarding what plays out in Afghanistan and how it affects the power dynamics. Let's see some of the comments of the people online.
Fidato referred to this historical fact that India was kind of supporting the Soviet invasion. Shehryar Afridi believes that regarding the recent deal, Prime Minister Modi needs to reconsider its regional policies. As an Afghan, Sargardhan criticizes India for its policies toward Afghanistan. Shafiq Hamdam believes that India's interference in Afghanistan has harmed India's popularity in Afghanistan. Prime Minister Modi believes India and Afghanistan can defeat the novel coronavirus together, as they have already done such cooperation to fight terrorism.
A year after independence from their British colonial masters in 1947, Sri Lanka immediately passed the Ceylon Citizenship Act, which discriminated against the Tamil minority and left hundreds of thousands of Tamils stateless. Then in 1956, they again passed the linguistic Sinhala-only Act, which seemed culturally, economically and politically discriminatory for the Tamil minority who spoke a different language. A controversial group soon emerged, seeking to gain autonomy and freedom from the Sri Lankan state. And things did not go well for quite a while.
For many people around the world, Sri Lanka is a prime holiday destination marked by lush forests and pristine beaches. But this island nation on the Indian nation hides a turbulent history marked by ethnic and political tensions. The Tamil quest for autonomy bordering on separation kicked off a brutal conflict in 1983, in which the chief protagonists were the Sri Lankan state and the separatist guerrilla movement, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. The war was mostly fought in the north and east of the country, but the sophistication of the Tamil Tigers meant that the conflict frequently reached Colombo and hit the state in the most sensitive places, notably the assassination of scores of government ministers and military commanders. In 2009, the Sri Lankan military achieved what was previously thought to be an impossible feat, namely the total eradication of the Tamil tigers from their strongholds in the Jaffna Peninsula in the north and Trincomalee and Batticaloa in the eastern province. And in a highly symbolic move, the military even managed to kill the tigers' charismatic leader, Villipalai Prabhakaran. But this victory came at a terrible humanitarian cost, as demonstrated by the slaughter and displacement of tens of thousands of Tamil civilians.
Tamil tigers have been completely wiped out in 2009. So there is no evidence that they have been active in Sri Lanka or elsewhere. However, the supporters, the political supporters of the liberation tigers of Tamilam or the Tamil tigers, you find them all over the world. Wherever the Tamils live, they still have a huge following and supporters. But interestingly, most of the organizations that have been supportive of tigers before, they have turned into civic politics. So I do not think tigers as a militant or a military organization would emerge again, or they are planning, or they are organizing. Since 2009, actually, I would argue that the United Nations was also complicit in the genocide of Tamil people in Sri Lanka, because they not only hid the numbers of casualties from international consumption, so they have also withdrew the offices in the field in the northern area where the war was taking on. And second, even though UN has come out with some strong resolution, there have not been any kind of serious implementation of the resolution. That is part of the reason why Sri Lanka cannot be forced to be accountable.
Regional and international media have not remained silent regarding what's going on in Sri Lanka, especially during the recent days. Let's see how the situation has been covered.
Sri Lanka blocks social media in an effort to quell anti-Muslim sentiments. Sri Lankan government is accused of colluding in anti-Muslim riots. Human rights situation in Sri Lanka is rapidly deteriorating. Danger of April 2019 terror attacks reigniting old communal and religious tensions and animosities. US State Department report highlights Sri Lanka human rights abuses. Many journalists say they are wary that the old dangers will return. While the civil war ended more than a decade ago, a steady campaign of intimidation and attacks on journalists ran throughout Mahinda Rajapaksa's presidency.
To talk about journalism and media in Sri Lanka, we cannot simply talk about that in a general sense, because the media there is ethnicized. We need to talk about the Tamil media, the Sinhalese media, and the English media. And most of the time, some of the most important Sinhalese media are very racist. Some of the English language media are very racist. They were actually part of the problem in terms of anti-Muslim violence and and the kind of the portrayal of those violences. And the second thing, this month in April, the government has issued a decree from the media division of the police that any media or any journalist that would criticize the authorities, they are going to be arrested under ICC Act. So that's been going on for some time. A couple of writers and novelists, they have been arrested. So if you look at the freedom of expression index for Sri Lanka, it is extremely in the lower category. So I would not consider Sri Lanka as a country is good for journalists and free expression and free media.
After 2 decades of fighting, 4 failed tries at peace talks, and the unsuccessful deployment of the Indian Army, the Sri Lankan establishment became tired and finally agreed to an internationally mediated ceasefire with the Tamil Tigers in 2002. But in 2006, major military campaigns were launched again and Tiger forces were defeated by May 2009. The 26-year civil war which engulfed Sri Lanka did not come without costs. UN reports claim that up to 100,000 people were killed in this course of war and many more were displaced. Some even say that Sri Lanka is still using security as an excuse to clamp down on civil rights.
The definitive end of the conflict led to hopes of a new dawn in Sri Lanka, marked by the emancipation of minorities and by extension greater political rights for all citizens of the state. But more than 10 years later, these aspirations have been largely unmet, and the Tamil minority in the north and east continues to complain of widespread discrimination. Beyond the Tamil issue, the civil rights and political freedoms landscape is deteriorating in large measures because of the desire of the security services to deepen their power and influence. The offensive of the Sri Lankan deep state received a shot in the arm following the Easter 2019 suicide bombings, which were claimed by Daesh. The Sri Lankan security forces imposed a state of emergency, which was formally lifted in August. However, activists complain that elements of the emergency powers linger and allow the Sri Lankan security services to clamp down on a wide range of civil society activities.
The situation in Sri Lanka has not been normal for several reasons. Most important reason is that Sri Lanka, under the current president, is a country that has been fully militarized. Every single aspect of life has become militarized. Even the management of coronavirus, it is actually the military that is responsible. And for all the major civilian positions, the current new president has appointed the former military officers, and the country has entirely been in military control. In that sense, speaking about normality is really, really difficult. So I do not think that Sri Lanka is currently in a normal situation.
The depth of this clampdown has given rise to fears that the Tamil insurgency could reignite as a reaction to the harsh security and political climate. So, ironically, the state of emergency can ignite the very threats it was supposed to suppress.
Social media is generally believed to have replaced the traditional news as the major source of information in Sri Lanka. Let's see how active users online have reacted to the issue of Tamil Tigers and the enforcement of security measures in Sri Lanka.
In this tweet, Aryan Sirvastava explains about the controversial Ceylon Citizenship Act. Aman Ashraf considers the Sinhala-only act as the main reason of racial conflicts and also counterproductive to the future of the country. This tweet is about the Sri Lanka president accepting the death of thousands of missing Tamils in the civil war. Regarding the new policy of the government, Hijaz criticizes the people for not paying attention to the consequences of the Sinhala-only act.
With this, we sign off this episode. You can watch each episode on the Press TV page in the program section. We are trying our best to improve the show, so we would appreciate your feedback and comments. Follow us on our social media platforms to stay updated, and we will meet the same time, same day next week. Thanks for watching.